In this video, I'm going to be building this heavy Relic black Telecaster. Sadly, this guitar is not for me. This is actually for my dad. I'm building this for his birthday. This video will be going up a few days after his birthday, just in case he sees it, because that might give it away slightly. This has been a very long process. I've been building this guitar over the course of about 7 months. I started early 2021. For the Strat and Tele that I built before, I got the body and the neck from Warmouth in the US. They're a really high quality aftermarket guitar manufacturing company, and I've been really impressed with their stuff so far. But due to COVID, they closed down for a while, and so it was a very long waiting list to get stuff from them. So I thought I would go more local. I found a luthier in the UK called Andrew Warren. He's based fairly close to London, so actually not that far away from me. And he makes some really cool guitars. He normally builds the whole thing, whereas I reached out to him and said, would you possibly be able to supply me with an unfinished body and neck so that I can do all the painting and relicking. So the neck is a maple neck and it has a flame maple fretboard which looks really cool. The body I believe is an older or ash body. It's been so long since I sent the email to him that I actually forgot the specs that I ordered. And then all the other parts are just various things that I got from Amazon and eBay and a few other places. My dad already has a Mexican Tele that has the normal Tele configuration for the pickups. And although he didn't know I was making this guitar, he kind of hinted that he was after a Tele with a humbucker in the bridge. So I got the Seymour Duncan Hot Rails pickup, which is basically a Stratocaster sized humbucker. And then I got a Seymour Duncan 1/4 pounder Tele pickup in the neck. And it sounds really cool. The body and the neck are both finished in nitrocellulose lacquer. The body is obviously black, and then I used a lacquer called Weakest Amber, and that gives you this nice vintage tint. And then I also sanded it back, which you'll see later in the video, which gives you this really nice played in Relic style to the neck. So now I've got a very long time lapse of me doing all the steps, and I'll do some voiceover and stuff over the top and talk about the process. Okay, so starting off with the body. Like I said, it's a maple neck with a flame maple fretboard, and then the body I'm pretty sure is older, but like I said, I forgot. Andrew did a bit of a finish on it. I think he called it dirty mahogany, and this makes the wood look quite old and grubby, which will look really nice as the paint comes off with the relicking, because you'll see it come through. I started off by spraying the nitro onto the body. I did a couple of coats of nitro sanding sealer and then started with the black nitro paint. Once that was done, I wet sand the body. I start off at about 800 grit, and then I slowly make my way up to about 3000. When the nitro dries, it leaves a bit of an orange peely texture on the guitar body, so you have to wet sand it to get rid of that. This is after finishing the first lot of sanding with 800 grit paper. It looked a little bit like the paint was actually coming off and I sanded too far through, but that's just what it looks like after using a really rough grit sandpaper on it. I think here I've jumped up to about 2000 and it starts to look a lot smoother. And then this is after the final sanding pass with 3000 grit paper. It goes really nice and glossy, and then I purposefully polished some areas a bit more than others to make it look uneven for the relicking. Then here we have the return of the famous high-tech brick wall from the last video. I just said it off the cuff when I was recording the voiceover, but lots of people commented on it and thought it was hilarious, so I had to bring it back for this video. For the pickups I went with Seymour Duncan. Like I said, the bridge is a Hot Rails pickup and then the neck is a 1/4 pounder. I got a nice wiring kit from a company called Tone Shaper on Amazon that do really nice pots and switches and things. And then the rest of this stuff is just miscellaneous hardware. I show some Wilkinson tuners here, but I ended up going with Fender road-worn ones just because they look a bit more authentic to the age of the guitar that I'm trying to make. And this is the water slide decal. It's from a company called Voodoo Decals. I got lots of people asking me about this in the last Strat video that I did, so this is the answer. After the rough relicking with the brick wall, I start to use a scalpel to do some more precise bits of scratching. I mainly use the scalpel to scratch off the paint around the edges of the guitar on the bevel. This is where on a lot of old guitars you see them pick up the most wear, because the sides are where it catches things when you bump it into stuff. And then I also use the scalpel to do some more precise scratching, and it works quite well for scraping off the nitro. I like to do some stuff around the bridge where you use a screwdriver to change the intonation, because you always slip and end up scratching the paint if you have a guitar for any amount of time around there. Then I went a bit nuts with the scalpel on the back to do some buckle rash. It's always quite tempting to go mental with this, and I went a bit over the top on my purple Tele. So for this one I mostly just did small scratches and then a few areas where it had worn away more. Then I moved on to aging a load of the hardware. I used black shoe polish on the pickguard and other plastic bits just to make them look a bit grubby. And then after I wiped it off, I also sanded the pickguard with some steel wool to get rid of the shiny finish. Then I took the saddles out of the bridge and started aging the switch plate and the bridge plate. I tried sanding it with steel wool originally, but it wasn't really getting through the chrome plating, so I ended up using 2500 grit sandpaper. That's still fine enough that it's basically polishing it, but it's just rough enough that I can get through the chrome plating and then use some acid to age the metal parts. Once I'd taken some of the chrome plating off, I used ferric chloride, and when you put it on exposed metal it starts to oxidize and look rusty. This stuff is quite strong, so you don't want to leave it on for too long, but I just put it on all of the metal bits of hardware for a couple of minutes and then wipe it back off. As you can see from the look of the bridge, it gives a nice kind of patinaed look in the areas where I'd worn through with the sandpaper to the metal underneath the chrome plating. Next I move on to setting up the electronics. I dropped the pickups in and then fed all the wires into the control cavity. Then I started looking at the wiring diagrams and working out how to set it all up. Then I put the switch on as well, and then it was time to start soldering. This is the first guitar that I've done where I've done all the electronics from scratch. The first guitar that I built that was my purple Tele, I bought a pre-wired soldering kit, so all I had to do was solder the pickups onto the switch and then it worked. I did the same thing for the pink Strat build a few months ago, but I ended up breaking the switch during the build, so I ended up having to replace the switch and rewire most of it again myself. So in the end that was kind of in between pre-wired and doing it yourself, and then doing the switch on that kind of gave me the confidence to just go for it and do the whole thing myself this time. It's about half the price if you don't pay for labor and just buy all of the parts. So I got this kit that's full of all the best components for a really good price, and then you just do it yourself. I don't even really know that much about soldering. I've just got to the point where it works when I do stuff, and I guess that's all you can ask for. So I just took my time, followed the diagram, and put it all together. The kit came with vintage cloth wire, which I really like. I much prefer this over modern plastic coated wires because you don't have to strip them. You can just pull the cloth back slightly to expose the wire, so it makes soldering quite easy. Also, the core seems to be a bit thicker than lots of modern wire, so when you bend it, it kind of holds its shape more, which is quite handy for doing the small linking parts on the switch. On my purple telly, the bridge pickup that I bought had a self-grounding backplate on it, which was really handy. But for this Hot Rails pickup, didn't have that, so I had to drill a little hole under the bridge and then put a wire going through that touches the metal to make sure it's grounded. The biggest pain with maple fretboards is that you have to also finish the fretboard, which involves spraying the lacquer over the top of the frets. So basically once it's dry, you then have to get the lacquer back off the frets, which proves to be very, very challenging. I use some very fine sandpaper to sand it off the top, and then I also go in later and use a scalpel to scratch it off on the sides of the frets. It's quite a time-consuming process and it's really boring. Then to seal and finish the back of the neck where I did the vinegar, because it's back to the bare wood, I wanted to put something on it to seal it properly. So I used a few coats of Danish oil, which sinks into the wood and seals it, but it still gives it that nice raw wood feeling on the back of the neck. And then we're back to the trusty brick wall to smash up the headstock. To make this match the body, I did lots of similar stuff, like rubbing it up against the wall and knocking it against the brickwork. Then once it's nice and beaten up, I brought it in and used some black shoe polish on it and rubbed it all over the headstock. This gets the polish into all of the little divots that are made by the dents from knocking it against things. Then I also did the classic cigarette burn on the headstock. You can see this from loads of people's guitars back in the day. People like Clapton used to leave their cigarettes burning in the headstock while they were playing, and then it would burn down and leave burn marks on the actual wood. So I did a similar thing with this. I don't smoke, so I just set a cotton bud on fire and left it there for a bit. I used some 1500 grit sandpaper on the neck plate just to make it a bit less shiny. I got the neck plate on but didn't tighten the screws completely because I wanted to use the E-strings to line up the neck to make sure it was in line with the bridge before I really sealed the screws in. So I tightened them all the way and then loosened them again a little bit, and then I put the high and low E-strings in and attached them to the tuners. Once these are in, it gives you a good idea if the neck is in line or not. If the angle's not quite right, one of the strings will quite likely be hanging off the edge of the fretboard. In my case, the high E-string was a little bit close to the edge. So what you can do to fix that is put pressure on the neck while the screws are slightly loose, and then while you're still holding it, tighten up the screws again. And if it's just a small adjustment, this will let you move move it into the correct place and then hold it in that new position once the screws are tightened. For me, this worked perfectly because it was only a small tweak. Once I was happy with the neck angle, I put the rest of the strings on, and then for the B and the E string, I put on the string tree. This is just a road-worn one that I got from Fender, so I didn't have to do any relicking to this. Then very importantly, I did a setup on this. I made sure the string heights were all good, and then also checked the intonation to make sure it played like a dream. And there we go, that is the build of the Telecaster. It took a really long time, it was over the course of about 6 months, but a lot of that was just because I didn't order some of the parts until quite recently. So I've had the body and the neck for ages, but I didn't order the pickups and the bridge and stuff until about 6 weeks ago. And now it's all together, it's an absolutely killer guitar, so let's see what it sounds like. All of my pedals are running into the HX Stomp, then I'm using the US Deluxe Vibrato head, and then an Own Hammer IR after that. So this is just a clean tone on the neck pickup. Now I'm going to kick on a tube screamer. Then there's the middle position, so combining a humbucker and a single coil. This is the clean tone. And I'll put a Klon style overdrive on this. And then finally the humbucker in the bridge position. To go into full screaming rock machine mode, I'm going to kick on a fuzz pedal on the HX Stomp. So there we go, that's what it sounds like. It's turned out really cool. This is the third guitar I've built and it went the smoothest of all three, so I guess I'm learning something from all the experience. It's going to live with me for a few weeks, and then when it's my dad's birthday, I'm going to take it to him and see what he thinks. So thanks very much for watching, hope you enjoyed the process of putting this all together. Check out some of the other videos on my channel and maybe consider subscribing.
You know it hurt me so bad. Made my poor heart skip a beat.